His quick wit brought chuckles from the competition, but his ingenuity with the race car left his rivals and NASCAR inspectors scratching their heads, while his mentoring molded raw driving talents into title contenders. Today on Men Behind the Wrenches, we take a look at the career of Harry Hyde. Growing up in Brownsville, Kentucky during the Depression, Harry Hyde developed a passion for automobiles. He tinkered with cars as well as drove them, but it was also wartime. World War II broke out, and at age 15, Harry enlisted. Welcome to Men Behind the Wrenches. I'm Jeff Hammond, your host. After his stint in the Pacific, Harry turned to auto racing for a living. From that moment, his genius would be unleashed, touching all aspects of the sport, from parts to people. Harry Hyde was one of a kind. Underage, Harry joined his friends in the war overseas when he convinced his grandmother to sign off on it. Even though he couldn't swim, Harry still survived his time in the Pacific.
Made 2 beach landings, and one of his buddies that had went over with him, they helped him sneak in an extra duffel bag, and he used it kind of like a float and would paddle, and they kind of stayed together till they got to where he could stand up, I guess. And shortly after that, he was wounded, so then he was transferred to the motor pool after he was wounded, and they kind of got split up there a little bit for the rest of the war, but he seemed to make it okay after that.
While assigned to the motor pool, Harry started to learn about automobiles.
I guess when he went to the motor pool, he worked on them some in and learned a good bit about them, and he enjoyed it, and just took off from there. And as soon as he got out, he went to work for a tire and rubber company in Akron, Ohio for, I think, about 6 or 8 months or a year, and punching the clock just wasn't his cup of tea. So he went back to working on automobiles and then in the salvage business and started out that way.
In 1946, Harry tried his skills behind the wheels at first before realizing his true calling was working on the car.
Not being able to drive didn't bother me because I just knew that I didn't have it. So I didn't try any longer than a couple of years. I won some races and got boogered up and wrecked, and well, then you started 60 cars on a quarter-mile track. And it wasn't nothing but big wrecks from start to finish. And I'd just rather fix the cars than I would drive them.
Harry stayed in the Midwest, tinkering with modifieds and sprint cars, when his path crossed with Nord Crosskopf.
He wanted to field a team, and he wanted somebody that had had a good record prior to that in the Midwest. So him and a guy by the name of Bob Hall, a race promoter up there, is the one that got those 2 together, and it just seemed to take off from there about the mid-60s.
It was 1966, and Harry Hyde was about to make his mark in stock car racing. After deciding to partner with Nord Crosskopf in 1966, Harry Hyde packed up and moved to North Carolina.
Most of your talented people was from this area. There was a few up there, but the miles of traveling back and forth was going to be astronomical. So he left my mother up there to watch after the business. He leased them out, moved down here, and started just, sort of built it up from scratch.
Harry's no-bull attitude attracted good young mechanics to work on his cars. During this time, his reputation for creativity began to develop, and the legend of his ingenuity began.
You didn't give him no phony answers. You had to be straight up. Now, you didn't have to be the greatest mechanic in the world. He would train you to that. But he didn't want no excuses or lame answers when he just wanted you to be straight up and honest with him. But he seemed to have a pretty good knack at picking people and keeping them together pretty much.
He was competitive. He wanted to be, go to the racetrack and win the race. That was what we were supposed to do. We spent more time back then trying to find the competitive edge than we did working on race cars. I mean, Harry would stay up all night. I mean, he and Tommy, we've come back to work the next day, and those guys have been in there doing something, and so we'd say, uh-oh, well, what are we going to do now? So it was trick.
As you know, in racing, you're never cheating till you get caught. You simply got the edge. And he could do something that was in the gray area of the rule book and grin about it and go on. But in his mind it wasn't anything wrong. It was just getting the edge.
And they would come to me and interview me. And, you know, I don't mind people interviewing me, but they come to me and interview me, and what kind of deal have you got? I said, well, we didn't use but 2 rings on them pistons. We cut the water pump way down, and we loosened the bearings up, and we loosened this up, and that's just a qualifier. And that engine there is really, that engine wasn't nothing but some junk.
He's the only person that ever drove for it ever pulled a gun on me. He did that one time when I wasn't racing for him, and I guess he and I got so tickled over the incident that we really formed a friendship. But I reached for something he had, and he said, he pulled that thing out and he said, I'd hate for you to make me hurt you. But you know, he was the type of guy, he was a great storyteller. And he remained a friend.
In 1967, Dodge team driver Bobby Isaac with Harry and his number 71 team. The duo clicked and it was a start of great things.
They had the same phrases, the same terms, the same, it just sort of clicked right off, you know. And then after they worked together for a while, they kind of knew what each other was thinking, you know. So it was, once we got a feel of what Bobby liked in a car, and once he got some confidence in the team, it just, you know, after that, it was just automatic, it seemed like.
Personally, they were very much alike. They both wanted to win. They would do whatever they had to win. Neither of them were, this is not the right word, social, in the sense that they like to go out and party and have a big time and get a lot of recognition and that sort of thing. They were very serious about their business and they wanted to win, and they'd do whatever they had to win.
It goes back to Harry's understanding of people. He knew what made Bobby Isaac tick, and he understood his driver. He understood his driver as a person. He understood Bobby's idiosyncrasies. He knew how to get the most out of him.
The teaming of Harry and Bobby Isaac would soon bring championship results. After winning 20 races in 2 seasons together, Harry Hyde and Bobby Isaac went into 1970 with high expectations. With 5 races to go, Bobby Isaac went into Charlotte with a 50-point lead. 3 weeks later, Harry and Bobby went into Rockingham, determined to clinch the title.
He knew where he had to finish at Rockingham to win the championship. And so Harry slowed him down, and at one point he was actually driving on the inner circle of the racetrack. He hated every second of that. And so he won the championship, and when I saw him after the race, I thought he was going to be so excited and happy about that. And the only thing he could talk about was how he had to drive so slow in that race to be sure that he had finished in the points, because he would have been trying to win the race.
After finishing 7th at the Rock, Harry and Bobby were crowned Grand National champions.
He didn't like bragging much. I mean, he didn't blow his own horn very much. He'd done his job, and that was it, you know. He never has been a big I love you type person. He just always felt like, well, that was our job. That's what we was paid to do, and we did it. You know, that was pretty much the way he looked at things.
After the championship, Dodge became frustrated with some of the rule changes in NASCAR. Crosskopf decided he wanted exposures in other areas of motorsports. So instead of running a full NASCAR schedule, he offered Harry and the K&K Dodge team new challenges. They ran Bobby Unser at Pikes Peak and Isaac at the famed Bonneville Salt Flats, where they set 28 speed records that still stand today, including a mile run at 216.946 miles per hour.
We had never been to Bonneville, never seen it, didn't know anything about it, and we took 2 truckloads of stuff out there and spent 2 weeks and literally worked ourselves to death. But our problem was getting a hold to the ground. And out there, it's just like a real hard crust with sand thrown on it. You never actually get a good grip like you would on a pavement. And in that particular class, the stock class, in a wheel-driven car, I don't think the traction's there anymore as much as it used to be. I could be wrong, but I would have thought they would have broke that record by now, or at least some of them. But from what I hear, they haven't. So it is impressive. I never would have thought they'd lasted this long.
With Harry's mark on each accomplishment, the team focused on the stock car circuit. After 37 wins and 48 poles, Bobby Isaac decided to part ways with Harry and the 71 team in 1972.
I don't know that it was as much a bad relationship with Harry as it was that he knew they were going to have a second car. And his pride just would not let him do that. He just did not want there to be a second car. There had always been a number 71. There had always been one 10K car.
And I don't know if Bobby may have thought we was going to replace him, but that wasn't the idea at the time. It was to make a two-car team could help each other better than two strangers, you know, like they're doing today. These multi-car teams, you can see what they've done.
Bobby was just tore up so bad because he had to pay some income tax. He made $140,000 that year. And we'd won, I think, about 11 or 12 races and had some poles. Had a good year and won a championship. $140,000. They hit him for about $35,000, $40,000 in income tax, and he like to die. But Bobby didn't understand that. He said, I'm just going to retire. I'll drive a half a dozen races or a dozen races, but that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to work for the government. I said, Bobby, if you don't make money, you wouldn't have to pay it. Now, I know you got some of that money left over, and that's yours. No, that ain't the way it is. I ain't going to do that. So, Nord hired Baker and was going to let Bobby drive a part of a season, whatever he wanted to drive, because Nord was like that. He wasn't about to get mad at Bobby because we'd had him 5 years ago. And then Bobby couldn't stand Baker.
Buddy Baker assumed the helm of Harry's Dodge.
They got along good. They really did. It surprised me. I mean, Buddy was and he was a joy to work with. I mean, he cut up and carry on all the time. And now putting him in the car, we had to make the driver compartment twice as big. You know, we had to move everything in it to get him in it.
That Hemi and that 71 that Harry Hyde had, I mean, it was so awesome. It was incredible. Should have won a couple of Daytona 500s for him. We won the 600 at Charlotte. You know, we won races together, but the car itself, and knowing Harry Hyde, that was the most special part of the whole time that I was with them.
By 1977, after 43 wins, Nord Kruskoff left the sport. Harry Hyde struggled over the next few years until he found his next big challenge. By 1983, Harry had been out of the sport for 5 years when he encountered a young boat racer.
Basically, Harry's the reason I got in racing. You know, we sat I stored my boats here when one of my drivers was killed, and I was racing boats. And one day in the rain, Harry said, if I just had a chance, if somebody let me build one car, I'd show them I could win again. And so, I mean, I was just like a young guy listening to this guy. It was just his father figure sitting there telling me these stories, and I'm eating it up. I mean, it's just, you know, it was good. And I believed him, and he did it. But Harry just brought stability, experience, and a love for the sport like nobody else I've ever seen.
Rick has probably overshadowed that whole deal, but really and truly, Harry was the mechanical guy behind the startup of that operation. Rick was the money, Harry Hyde was the brain.
Hendrick Motorsports debuted in 1984 with Jeff Bodine as the driver. Harry led the team to 3 wins in their first season. Harry was back.
He was just so energized by Rick and so challenged to prove that he could assemble a team and a car and go and win and beat some of the guys that he'd raced against and hadn't raced against in the last several years, you know.
Just tremendous amount of experience. You know, he had done it for, been Winston Cup racing for so many years. He knew the ins and outs. He knew a lot of the stuff that should be wrote between the rules, but NASCAR hadn't wrote it down yet. You know, he knew what to do to get the most out of those cars.
By 1986, Hendrick expanded to a second team when he hired a hot shoe, Tim Richmond. Richmond's talent was no secret, but he needed a mentor to turn him into championship contender. Rick decided to team Harry with Tim.
And no doubt, man, was it was a strange association to put Tim and Harry together. And we just needed a couple other things that got switched on within the team. And when that happened, boom, the success just was unbelievable, explosion out of that, you know, that year.
they had to learn half of each other's lingo, but they finally got it squared away. It was, you know, it was, they'd make jokes about it later, you know, joke with each other about it. And Tim would joke with me because he knew I was his son, you know. I'd take care of the transporter and be taking care of Tim's stuff. And he said, well, I guess it's time to go out here and see Pop, see what he's got on. You know, he'd call him Pop. And Dad grew real close to Tim after that. I mean, it was kind of like a father-son relationship.
Harry's specialty was grooming drivers later on, bringing drivers along, knowing how to talk to them, knowing how to coach them. Tim needed that from time to time. You know, he needed that from time to time. Harry could get that out of him.
I think if I had to recall one of the main things, the reason why Tim and I made it is I had to make a believer out of Tim and how to drive a car. He overrun the tires and refused to back up or let it get a hold or settle down or anything. He loved, nobody run 50-50 weight distribution. He loved it because that's what he got out of the Indy cars with a heavy back end, and he would always pitch the car where he wanted it. And he was very easy to set a car up for because that's about all you had to do was put something in there that wouldn't bottom out with him and give him a 50-50 weight distribution or get a little bit heavier in the back end. Nobody today in this circuit will run a heavy back end. Nobody.
He's what Tim needed. You know, he keep Tim kind of, you know, in the middle of the road, and during the race he'd talk to Tim, but Tim looked at Harry like a you know, big drill sergeant, because Harry was like that. I
had to teach him how to run the tires. You know, the tires would only hold a certain pace, and then they start backing up. Now you must ease off and let those tires run at a certain temperature. See, I got a gauge and started sticking Tim's tires. But everybody else's tire sheets would be running 260, we'd be running 300 degrees. And the tire starts coming apart. And the harder it tried to get away from Tim, the harder he would fight it. And that was all a part of the deal where I said, if you don't settle down and if you don't listen to me on the radio, we are not going to make it. And he finally settled down. He said, you tell me when to speed up.
Harry would tell you what he thought. He didn't care who you were. I mean, I think he was known in the garage area. I guess one time in Talladega, he got mad at NASCAR, took a maul and got on top of the car and beat the roof off of one of his cars because they didn't like it. I mean, you know, he was very vocal, and at the same time, he knew what he was doing, but he was committed. I mean, and when he believed in something, you look out, and he was exactly perfect for Tim Richmond.
In 2 seasons together, Harry and Tim won 9 times, but their time together would be short. Harry Hyde had formed a special bond with Tim Richmond during their 2 seasons together, but Tim was suffering from a life-threatening illness and never recovered. Harry was devastated.
He didn't tell me for a long time, but when he did, I remember one night we was riding back, he said, you know, you only get 1 or 2 drivers in a lifetime that you really know is special. And he said, I guess I've had the privilege of having 4 or 5. But he said, this little fella here, he said, it's almost a crime for him to get ill like this, because he said, there's no telling how much talent he had left that nobody will ever get to see.
Harry continued on, working in the sport he loved until his death. Within NASCAR, Harry remains one of the most beloved and respected characters whose innovations live on.
I mean, he's totally different from a lot of the crew chiefs that they like it and they love it, but they want to make as much as they can make, and they're in it to make a living. They want to win too, but Harry was in it because he loved it.
Very bright character, and just an absolute pleasure to talk to. And did a lot of things 15 years ago that people are doing, that started doing 8 or 10 years after he started them. A lot of innovations in the NASCAR Winston Cup, like checking build-up in tires and what have you. Harry's been doing that for a long, long time before other people ever did it.
And he was very innovative on a lot of things, and he always kept you in the dark. Like, he would go change a radiator and pick up a half a second. I mean, you're not gonna change a radiator and pick up a half a second. If you could, you wouldn't let nobody see you change it.
but he would make it obvious, you know, that he's changing his radiator and then go out and pick up a half a second. So you never knew where he was gaining his speed from.
He would hold court, and trust me, when Harry talked, you listened, but he was very forgiving. Trust me, he forgave me a lot.
He was like Smokey, one of the biggest cheaters in racing. And here again, we all call it self-defense. But you know what? He had the bravery to do it. And he's got the stats to back up that he's one of the greats.
A week before he passed away, I was lucky enough that I had been to Hendrick's. And as I started out, he was mowing around the lake there on his property, right across from Hendrick's. Well, he just shut it off, and we sat down and we talked for about an hour. And to me, that was the most special hour I'd ever spent in my life, because we kind of went back and recapped the times that we raced together, and he was the type of guy you just kind of wanted to hug his neck. He was that special.
With Hollywood's help, Harry Hyde's legacy was etched in memories forever in the movie Days of Thunder. The entire character of Harry Hogg was based on Hyde's life and notorious shenanigans around the racetrack. For all of you fans who always wondered, yes, he really did eat ice cream in the pits. Harry was a true character in the sport, whose wrench could create magic on the racetrack. For Men Behind the Wrenches, I'm Jeff Hammond, and thanks for joining us.